What if salmon could speak? Having been around for thousands of years, we think the current generation of salmon would have quite a few things to say about what's happened to them. So because they can't, we'll speak for them. As California's most senior water rights holder, salmon need Governor Jerry Brown to listen to what they need and to take action before it's too late. The story of California is linked forever to the gold rush. Coastal towns thrived from the timber, fur, and gold. Along with the red wood, the brown furs, and gleaming gold, the writhing, swirling silver of wild salmon was as important to the coastal residents as much as any of the other colors. That's the way it used to be until a few short years ago.
In California, both the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers are used for shipping. But remember, salmon are caught in the river and also in the ocean along the Pacific coast.
Millions of Sacramento River salmon, providing thousands of jobs, hundreds of millions in economic activity, and millions of pounds of delicious, healthy food for Californians year after year after year. All of this has been nearly destroyed. Along with the salmon, California's fishing families have paid a heavy price.
We're watching our lifestyle, our living, are taken away from us at the hands of somebody else's greed and manipulation. It's not something that anybody should be arguing with, because there is no defense for what's going on here. There's nothing I enjoy more than playing with my granddaughter. I'm denied that opportunity because I have to go 600 miles away where it takes me 14 hours driving or 100 hours, on the boat to get back to where I can visit with my own family. That's not right. This estuary, this system here provides fish for everybody on this entire coast into Canada.
California's delta was once a 400,000-acre tidal marsh with extensive uplands at the confluence of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. Like most of us, the delta is not what it used to be. The delta and all of California's major and minor water systems are interconnected.
Children, you must share your things. You mustn't be selfish. People should always share things.
Oh, all right, here.
Even little kids know that sharing is necessary in order to get along. But when it comes to water, there are big and powerful companies and organizations who seem to think their water needs are more important than others. Salmon are hurting because there is not enough water to go around. California's water resources are way over-appropriated. So, Governor Brown, salmon need you to be a hero and do what is required to restore the ecosystem. For that to happen, you're going to need to require much stronger flow standards and require reductions in average annual water diversions. Make sure that the people you hire or appoint to run California's water systems know that you expect the flow requirements for the Delta to be based on strong, peer-reviewed science and the economic realities facing our state.
What I propose will be painful. It's going to take sacrifice from every sector of California.
You've made it clear that California needs to face facts. Don't let a small group of powerful agribusiness interests be allowed to ridicule sound science for their own greedy ambitions.
The policeman on the corner is a good symbol for law.
Salmon need existing water laws to be enforced.
The State Water Board is not protecting the Delta. In order to protect a few hundred growers on the west side of the valley, we're clearly exceeding the ability of the Delta by pumping these huge volumes of water. My solution is that you declare the irrigation of high selenium soils an unreasonable use of water under California law.
That would go a long way to help, to ensure that we have salmon water now. Has this ever happened to you? You're in the grocery store, walking the aisles, thinking about what you might want to get for dinner. You think, how about something different? Something good for you, something delicious. How about salmon? Not the farm salmon. You know you don't want that. No, you want the good stuff. Wild California king salmon, considered to be the best salmon in the world. If you're lucky to see any wild salmon, it'll probably be from Washington or Alaska, and it might be as much as $25 a pound. Probably time to think about something else for dinner. What happened?
Man-made pipelines will have to reach far out to tap the clear wilderness lakes, as well as the hidden treasures of groundwater.
We have to put in a lot of machinery to put this water where we want it at the right time. And that's why we have powerful pumps and great gates and huge valves. And of course we have to bring it from the reservoir to where we want it, sometimes as much as 100 miles to a great city at a distance, and then deliver it to the individual houses, so that when you want the water, all you do is reach out and turn on a tap, like this.
California salmon are disappearing. Salmon are actually on the edge of extinction. Extinction, as in no more. People caused this tragic situation, and people can fix it.
Change of any kind is often opposed by vested interests.
We just can't do it, Jim. We've got too much tied up in present equipment.
Is that, in your view, is that like a new world order, or is that something that you're doing that with the hope that eventually those things could be restored?
I don't like the phrase "new world order." That sounds like the builder. That sounds like the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergers. So let's be very clear. We're not going down that road. Well, did they use some phrase called the new norm or something?
Preventing further harm to the Delta and restoring it back to health is critical to those who depend on it, wildlife and people. After all, no one wants salmon to become extinct, but that journey back from the precipice is difficult.
Salmon are a little more complex than Delta smelt because they also depend on upstream areas.
I think salmon actually is a remarkably resilient species. We do know what we need to do.
First off, you have to improve flows in the upper rivers, creating better flow regimes for the fish, making sure we have more cold water.
We need to reduce the numbers of salmon that we kill in water diversions. We need to improve overall conditions so their survival improves. If we do, probably of all the species, salmon are the most resilient, and I believe that they will be able to come back.
And the person who can have the biggest positive impact right now to fix it is California Governor Jerry Brown.
And it's a matter of balance. It's going to be objected to, but there are even more people who will say, thank God, we're finally facing the music.
Let's remember this about water. It's essential to life. It's abundant in nature, but let's keep in mind the time, the money, and the labor that's spent to produce our great water supply systems.
If salmon could tell their story, we would hear about their life cycle, and we would learn just how difficult humans have made it for them to even survive, let alone thrive. It's all about water.
Two colorless, tasteless, odorless, invisible gases combined in just exactly the right way to give us this wonderful life-giving liquid. Just plain old H2O.
Imagine for a moment what it must be like to be a wild California king salmon, born in a cold, clear river high in the mountains. When the time is right, you begin a long swim down the river, through the Sacramento Delta, a complex and fragile ecosystem in the middle of the state, where the fresh water turns salty. You instinctively swim through the Delta. You swim under the Golden Gate Bridge and out to live most of your life in the wild waters of the Pacific Ocean. One day, an internal switch goes off. It's time to mate. You somehow know exactly how to find your way back to the mouth of the San Francisco Bay. back through the delta where the salt water begins to turn fresh, and you swim upstream to reach the riverbed of your beginnings, where you spawn and then die. Now, the only way to get there is to go up rivers that are manipulated and dammed by humans. Changes made in the name of big agriculture and land use policies that encourage millions of people to live in or next to deserts. There are consequences for those choices: reduced water flows that cause higher than ideal temperatures, water pumping stations and dams that make the journey much more challenging than nature intended.
How you see the world depends upon where you're sitting. You know, if you're sitting in Modoc, only 28% of you think I should be standing here. If you're in Alameda County, there's about 73% of you who think I should be. So there are very different views of what the state needs.
You've made it clear that California needs to face facts about our fiscal situation. Last year, the legislature put an $11 billion measure on the ballot that was ultimately so badly received by voters that your predecessor took it off the ballot instead of risking its defeat. They passed it in the dead of night.
6 o'clock in the morning.
They tell you that it will solve our water problems. Don't believe it. Prop 18 is an $11 billion gift, but not for you. It's for corporate agriculture's most powerful bullies in the Westlands Water District. They get the benefits, and Southern Californians get the bill and no water. And it gets worse for everyone when school, police, and fire department budgets are ravaged to pay for it. Say no to the growers that want you to keep them rich at your expense. Vote no on Prop 18. Nothing has changed, but there are still forces that insist that building dams, canals, and tunnels to move water around is a good idea.
And they want to build 2 more big dams now, one on the San Joaquin River, 6 miles upstream from a big dam, Friant Dam, that will cost several $billion.
We've always assumed, certainly in the 20th century, that people would move where they wanted to move, and we'd build what we'd wanted to build, and we would find the water. We can't assume that there will always be enough water to meet growth where we want it and when we want it. Let's get better at integrating the kinds of planning that we really want to do.
The waterworks men have the answers to the problem. With your help, they can put their plans to work.
To protect the delta from further harm, Salmon urged that only non-structural alternatives be considered. We're not saying not to build anything. The purpose of state and federal investigations of a delta-isolated facility is to decrease the physical vulnerability and increase the predictability of delta supplies, not to increase average annual delta exports.
I think people will want to protect and defend California as they've come to understand it. And that's really what's at stake here.
Investigations of any new delta facilities must evaluate a full range of capacities and operations. Because in the end, more than anything, we need salmon water now. We live in a complex world. A world of work and families. Each of us has a responsibility to be smart about the way we use water. Each of us can make a huge difference in the struggle to stop salmon's march to oblivion.
This will be the 53rd day without rain.
We think it's great that Californians are recognizing the importance of water conservation. After all, there's only so much water to go around. But there are still too many instances of carelessness. The fact is that agriculture uses 80% of the developed surface water in California, and urban users use 11%. There must be proportional conservation.
What's the price, miss? I work in a factory that makes this doll. $2 is too much.
I'm very sorry, sir, but your company charged us more for this shipment, so we had to raise our selling price.
There needs to be a hard, close look at agriculture subsidies and consider how this drives the demand for irrigation water.
Through a bountiful natural cycle and the wonders of engineering, we have come to take for granted an abundance of water.
Economists will tell you that price impacts usage, so a system of tiered pricing of water usage for both urban and agriculture water users is a smart way to lower demand.
I think there's enormous potential in efficiency, enormous potential to do what we want and restore ecosystems, leave water in the streams more, while still meeting the demands that we have for the economic goods and services we want. That's the first thing we need to do, and the potential to do that is huge.
Junior and all the other raindrops could be useful if they're treated right.
Price elasticity is a critical factor in driving down demand and would be a powerful tool in a water conservation program that works for all users.
So here's the problem. We are very, very divided. That's where I meant the Alamedans and the Modokians don't see the world in the same way. Or the Kearnians. They have a different view than the San Franciscans. So and my job is to find some common core here that we can agree on.
So, Governor Brown, the ball is in your court. We need to change the way that we look at the cost of water and make the hard choices that favor preserving and protecting this critical public trust resource once and for all.
So Pop Cloud has signaled the sun to bring Junior back. It's time to talk things over about how Earth folks, for their own good, should play fair with raindrops.
Gosh, it's good to be back here with you, Pop.
I'm glad to have you home again with me, son.
The thing that is the most important to preventing the extinction of salmon is using the best science available.
If science is so darn wonderful, why doesn't some genius build a contraption like this?
Science is everywhere.
So you see, fellas, water is really just a combination of two different gases.
Wow.
It guides us and offers up hope to resolve difficult problems. And there is no question that California's water issues can only be resolved by paying attention to the best available science. California's history of decades of water engineering, short-sighted policymaking, bad management, and political grandstanding has had a devastating impact on salmon and the overall health of California's Delta and San Francisco Bay estuary. Because good, sound science has been ignored, or worse, dismissed. Speaking at a forum presented by the Competitive Enterprise Institute about California's problems is Westland's Chief Deputy General Manager.
We have problems. We have fish that have declined for who knows what reasons. We've spent about $20 to $30 million a year studying the Delta and monitoring the fish, trying to understand them. We don't understand them, but we do have regulators who like to shut the pumping plants down.
It's a complicated system. But to pretend that the amount of water that we take out of the Delta has no effect on the health of the system is disingenuous. And the science clearly shows that the volume of water is fundamentally related to the health of our aquatic ecosystems and their fisheries. When one special interest who has one particular concern says, it's not my problem, I have no effect on this, it's everybody else's problem, I think alarm bells ought to go up and we ought to look a little more carefully.
There also is no question that the imposition of restrictions by the Fish and Wildlife Service under biological opinions and by the Natural Marine Fisheries Service under the Endangered Species Act restricted our ability to move water.
In view of my 20 years of work in this area, I am convinced that this proposal would be extremely expensive and very uncertain of success.
My name is Michael Abrams. I work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. I am the U.S. Aster Science Team Leader. The sharp boundary between mountains and desert is the San Andreas Fault. The San Joaquin Valley, the Great Valley as it's called, occupies most of the state of California.
For too long, reputable science findings that have clearly identified the reasons for salmon's tragic collapse have been dismissed by policymakers and politicians.
It's important for all the viewers to know that the reason that the water's been shut off is because of the Endangered Species Act. There's two different biological opinions that are out there, one dealing with a little bait fish called the Delta smelt, and another one that basically involves nearly every fish on planet Earth.
They have rejected science-based findings that powerful agribusiness and Southern California water managers say would threaten their water deliveries. That has to stop.
In fact, one of the most important habitat characteristics for these species that we tend to focus our attention on is water. I mean, salmon live in the water, and they are responding to the conditions in the river channels and in the estuary that are associated with the timing, amounts, and qualities and quantities of the water flowing through those systems. Salmon don't live in trees. And the quality of the water in their habitat may in fact be influenced by whether there's a tree overtopping it, but in fact it is really the flow and the conditions in the water that are important to that fish.
I think that makes sense.
Governor Brown, please, for the sake of the salmon, insist that your water experts include a strong emphasis on science, particularly on ensuring that the results of the best available science are actually incorporated into decision-making. And that includes using smart biological objectives to measure ecosystem recovery.
Living in a scientific age, we need citizens who know enough about science to make intelligent decisions about what they do. Are we going to use it constructively? It'll be up to you, and you too.
God blessed our area, and that with a rich delta, a rich fishery, and abundant Chinook salmon. And God blessed the western San Joaquin Valley with lots of sunshine and selenium and other toxic elements and minerals. And I'd like to know who the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water and Resources are to play God by taking away from our rich delta and bay and delivering it down to the western and south San Joaquin Valley.
This is just the facts, and hopefully that'll be enough for people to make a decision.
Governor Brown, salmon will not go extinct if you instruct your water system experts to do the right things, to enforce existing water laws, to follow sound science in fixing the delta and critical salmon habitat, to do what is necessary to make more water, salmon water, now. These geese are patrolling the crushed dreams of fishermen who used to support their families fishing for salmon. For decades, small family-owned boats went out this Fort Bragg inlet to fish for salmon. But years of politics and water mismanagement have made salmon fishing difficult or impossible.
We're stripping all the stuff off of this Paul G here. It was a nice salmon boat at one time, and now it's going to be a floating dock.
Bruce Abernathy owns this junkyard of dead salmon fishing boats. His inventory keeps growing, something he would rather not see.
I know most of these boats like you know another person, and it's very difficult for me to see them just crushed up because they've made families' livings for a long time.
It's growing because he's the guy the Fort Bragg city officials call whenever a salmon boat is abandoned. In our series, If Salmon Could Speak to Governor Brown, we've highlighted several things that the governor can do to help reverse salmon's tragic collapse.
They're difficult in different ways, and I don't want to elaborate or try to make comparisons. All right?
In this video, we want to show the governor the human side of the story.
The lack of salmon stock for fishing has really hurt our local fishermen and women. It's very hard for them to make a living anymore, and that's the backbone of Morro Bay, is our fishing and tourist industry. And so many of our tourists actually come to see the fishermen, which is something that people perhaps don't put together in their minds, but it's very much a part of our tourism draw, is the fishing boats in the harbor and actually being able to see them unload, to have that fresh salmon that we used to be able to buy on the dock. That's really important to our economy and just to our whole city image, because that's who we are. We're a fishing village.
That boller comes off,
yeah,
the tip comes up like that, you got the salmon.
Salmon is important too as a tourist magnet. Down the road from the famous Morro Bay Rock is Verge's Landing and Tackle Shop, a sort of landmark loved by recreational fishermen for decades. Before salmon's collapse, Californians went out of their way to get on a boat and go fishing. Small shops like this cater to anglers of all ages, and there are a lot of them. During a normal salmon season, approximately 500,000 fishermen board a boat to find wild California king salmon out on the ocean. All those trips brought in lots of money that businesses depended on, and money for taxes. These guys had not been allowed a salmon fishing trip for a couple of years.
It was awesome, especially, to hook up that first salmon. It was a rush.
In 2010, when a sports season was allowed, the crowds came out, but there were not very many fish to be found. Jenna was one of the lucky ones.
How many salmon have you caught in your life, Jenna?
Just these two.
This is the first one? First salmon. First salmon.
Yeah, I guess I caught a really big salmon.
Well, we'll appreciate it very much, right?
Yeah.
We just got started here the last week. Just with a slim showing of salmon, the people have come out of the woodworks to take advantage of just a hope of catching a salmon. It's nice to see a few fish showing up, but what we need to make us a living on is not in the ocean right now.
Back in the days before the salmon runs collapsed, San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf docks were filled with busy commercial fishing boats. But this is what it's looked like for the last couple of years. And the fishermen and their families have been hurting.
When I'm fishing, I feel like I'm doing something productive. I'm supplying a product that people enjoy and like, and I'm sustaining myself and my family. I hear the question all the time, when am I going to go get a real job? And I've only been doing this for about 35 years. It's a difficult thing to answer.
I tell my kids the reason I'm not fishing is because there's just not enough water to sustain the salmon. They don't see any salmon in the store display case, but they see a lot of vegetables. They can't understand why there's plenty of one and none of the other.
The economic value of salmon is undeniable. Guess how much of an impact a healthy fishing season means in dollars? Including every part of the distribution system from fishermen to consumers, the total sales in the California economy was nearly $10 billion. The income impact on salaries, wages, benefits, and business owner earnings was over $5 billion. And nearly 180,000 jobs were funded by fishing. Excessive and unreasonably large water diversions, water taken from rivers and the delta, are one of the biggest reasons for the demise of salmon stocks. Water pumping increased by over 16% in the last decade alone, as junior water rights holders who are last in line to get water pushed their way up in the line and seized more salmon water. Record high water diversions in recent years tracks directly with record low recent salmon returns. But with a new administration in Sacramento taking a look at the situation with fresh eyes, there is hope that the salmon population declines can be reversed. Fixing the problems can't come soon enough. Critical infrastructure systems that support both recreational and commercial salmon fishing are in trouble. Coastal cities and their ports are in trouble.
The fact that there's been no salmon fishery, for me to pay the patrolmen who run the search and rescue boat, keep the facilities working for everybody, we need user fees to pay for that, and I need money from the leaseholders.
You know, this is really good for people who believe we should get our fish from farms and they should be raised. But if you want wild, healthy fish, who's going to be around to teach the next generation how that works, how to catch fish? This is a mentoring occupation. You work on a boat, you ride on a boat, you learn how to do it. Pretty soon you're operating a boat. If you're successful, you buy a boat, you buy a business, and you take care of your family. But we don't have the opportunity to do that if there aren't any fish to catch.
It's time for California's salmon to be treated with respect. It's time to recognize that not too long ago, wild Pacific salmon sustained families and whole communities, and it can again. It's time to reject the arguments of anyone who dismisses the findings of sound, peer-reviewed science. It's time to develop water policies that allow for both farmers and fishermen to thrive and prosper. In other words, it's time for salmon water, now.